Hey, everybody. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. I am here with my co-host, JC.
It's a pleasure to be back, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You help me maintain some kind of sanity in these podcasts as well.
It's
so, folks, we're here today. Short podcast. We want to talk about, being inclusive, and want to take this a little bit of a step further. And, a question that came up in one of our podcasts last year was, does inclusive mean accepting all employees' personalities and behaviors? And what really came up is, what if an employee is a real jerk? Do we just accept them as is? Because that's what it means to be inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you bring them into the fold. They're part of, you include everybody. Everyone gets a trophy. Tide Pods
Everyone
for
gets
all.
a trophy. You're a jerk. Here's a trophy for being the biggest jerk there is. Welcome to the team. We hired you as is. We don't want to change a thing. Or what the reality is we hired you not knowing you were a jerk, or you've been an employee for a while and now you're being a jerk.
Yeah.
And more importantly, of being a jerk, which is a much nicer word than I would really like to say, but we're not going to, is, okay, what's going on? And nobody wants to work with you. So even though I can tolerate you, nobody else wants to work with you. And ding, 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 that's the problem. It's
really intriguing the way that you bring that up. I do have a personal situation. I'm going to leave names and the name of the employer out of it, but there was a guy he onboarded. Seemed like a fairly nice gentleman. And after working together, he was kind, he was cordial to start. And then the humor came out. Then it was dry, sarcastic humor. Then that turned into like aggressive behavior type humor and picking on the elderly and making fun of disabled people and, looking people up on Facebook or Instagram while he's talking with them. And these are members of the public that you don't need to be doing that on. And then amongst it all, he was always shooting up. So anyone that he worked with moving upward thought very highly of him. Anyone that he moved past, that he used to work with, he'd just burn those bridges along the way. You reach a certain point there where they're inclusively adding him to everything that they do along the way, but they don't know his true personality until he reveals it. And then he burns more people. But by the time you figure that out, your investment is now 10 years deep, and it might be a little bit too late unless you've got a strong backbone and people skills to step up and deal with someone like that. You really got to tackle this from a different perspective from the onset, right, Wendy?
Absolutely. And the biggest thing that I heard in your story there was, he basically rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but got promoted anyway. So do you think that those people that he burned while he kept being promoted, do you think they're happy and engaged?
Oh, they're never going to work with him. Never going to work with him again. He's on his own. He's in his own island now.
But then they're even, if it was me and then a jerk got by, and this has happened to me too, where, okay, I'm doing everything I can. I'm trying to do the right thing. Don't get me wrong. I've been a jerk at times as well, and I've learned from it. But, when you see somebody who's being a jerk or just misbehaving and going against your company values or just, community values and professionalism, and they keep getting promoted, that makes me, the super productive, engaged, nice employee, not want to be super productive, not want to be engaged. Maybe I'll stay and keep taking your money, but I'm not going to go the extra mile because I've already done that and you promoted that person and not me. And then on top of that, there have maybe been complaints, whether they're formal or informal, and you haven't done a darn thing about it. So
it's intriguing.
Retention.
At the end of the day, absolutely retention. Inclusive means accepting and valuing diversity within your organization. This includes diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, and other personal characteristics. And it also means creating a work environment where all the employees feel welcomed. All the employees feel welcomed, respected, and supported. So while it's important to be inclusive, it's also important to have standards of behavior and professionalism in the workplace, just like Wendy's telling you.
I had a client who just would not listen to me about the jerk in their workplace. And they were, had such high turnover. It was a high turnover industry to begin with, but it was also like, hey, you have employees who are willing to work for your difficult industry in a difficult time. This was during COVID, and they're willing to come to work versus staying home collecting, and, making not the best pay, but they're willing to do it. But you're letting this guy over here be a bully to them and be a jerk to them, not harassing, not discriminating. And they lost so many employees. The turnover was so high. Needless to say, they're not my client anymore. But I was like, if you just get rid of this person, I can't get rid of this person because they're the only one with this certification or this skill. I'm like, they're not the only one in the universe with this certification or this skill. So if that's the only reason you're keeping that person there, get somebody else that certification, get somebody else that skill, or a business owner. If you're small, you get that certification. So now you're marking the boxes that are required by, your the compliance in your industry, but get rid of those employees as soon as possible. Another thing that I want to talk about is this comes up as well too. What if the reason for their behavior, for their jerkiness, is actually related to maybe a medical condition or a disability?
Interesting.
Ooh, now what do you do?
Yeah, it's $1 million question. Well, reasonable accommodations, modifications, adjustments to the work environment, someone's settling in, they're doing their thing, physical modifications to the work environment. At the end of the day, someone's still being a jerk. They're a jerk, though. It doesn't matter if they, but what if it crosses a line? How do you tackle that?
So with the ADA, Americans with Discrimination Act, this affects any employer with 15 or more employees. And just remember also that many states have their own version of disability laws too. So depending on your state, you have to look at what the laws are in your area. But the federal ADA, prohibits discrimination against applicants or employees who meet the statute's definition of qualified individual with disability. They define disability in 3 ways: a physical or mental impairment, and that's important, that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities in an individual. The second one is a record of such impairment. So they just can't come to work and go, oh, this is it. I have a disability. It's because I looked it up on the internet last night. And then number 3, being regarded as having such an impairment. So The regarded part means, does anybody know about that? Or are managers or employees making it up and assuming that this person has a disability? And assuming can get you in trouble in real life too, not just work. But if you just say, I'm assuming that person has a disability, but there's no record or proof, then you may actually have to follow the ADA as well. So be careful with the assumptions, with the physical and mental impairments. They're not always easy to identify. But as JC said, with or without a physical or mental impairment that is or is not covered by the ADA, that does not allow people to bully, discriminate, harass, show bias, or be a jerk and go against the expected behaviors in your workplace.
Reasonable accommodation.
Accountable.
Reasonable accommodation is that collaborative process, right, Wendy? It involves the employee, the employer. It's that coming to terms together, finding a solution. You find that solution that enables the employee to perform, but you're doing it together to meet the means of the ends. If that employee is still not performing through that process, you're blurring a line with the ADA, but there's still personnel concerns there, and you're still a manager, and there's still an employee at the end of the day, even though it's a fine line, right?
And then even with the going a step further for the larger employers that are listening, if you are 50 employees or more, and then again, depending on your state, you might have other requirements, but the Federal Family Medical and Leave Act also, kind of dives into and intertwines with the ADA as well, because if it's a new impairment, medical impairment, for example, that they're having a mental health issue and or that's causing them to act out, but they've never acted out before. If you have somebody who has never been a jerk before and suddenly they are being one, really dig into what is the reason, what has changed in the workplace. It could be a manager, it could be a product, it could be a client that's bringing that out. If none of that is obvious, then it could be something with that person, that employee's physical or mental health. Yeah. And you do have an obligation to accommodate And that could be removing them from the workplace so that they can get the treatment that they need, but then holding that job for them when they come back. After you've gone through all your, your list, your ABC list, my AD, my FMLA, how many other lists there might be depending on what your industry is, and then what state or county or city you're even in and the laws that are affected there, then is when you should take the next step and say, okay, first of all, you want to address this possibly with an employment attorney or with an HR consultant who is familiar with your state and then with these laws. And then you say, you know what? We've documented this all. We've done everything we can for you, employee, but you're still acting like a jerk and you're misbehaving and there's no more accommodations left. And so if you do this one more time, you're not allowed to be in our organization. And I have to tell you, the coworkers that are involved in that are going to say, yay. I mean, most people are still going to be empathetic. I feel for that person, but now I could come back to work and I can do my job because you removed the jerk from my workplace. With that said, thanks for being here today. Everybody have a great new year and we will chat with you soon.